Hey guys, so I finally got my hands on one of the wannabe flywheel explorers, or say products in that new MicroLongRange class. This is the Eachine Shadow Fiend. It's sort of the cheapest entry-level MicroLongRange you can get, so therefore I think it's quite interesting to see what you can get at the lowest price point. It's the Vista version here, comes without a receiver. So I will compare this directly to the Vista version of the original Explorer here. Alright, so let's dive right into it. Alright, so let's check out the electronics first. Cadex Vista unit, the full unit, just like on the Flywheel Explorer. With the DJI camera. The stack here is a basic 20x20. Some Eachine model here. It's not soft mounted. I don't know if that will cause any issues, let's see. But in any case, there's no soft mounting here on the FC in any way, shape, or fashion, just nylon standoffs. That's a 4S 20 amp ESC. If that spec is correct, I mean, this should be more than enough. The 13 amp 6x60 on a Flywheel Explorer works without any issues. The 405 stack should also be fine. I mean, for the purposes of the squad, that is going to be absolutely okay. I don't see any issue here. The GPS is a, I guess that's rebranded BN180. It says Eachine BT180 GPS. So one of those basic small GPSs. A long LHCP antenna, just like on the Explorer. I think this is more or less a one-to-one copy of it. If it's not even, could it be the same antenna? It could even be the same antenna. I don't know if that's the same antenna. They both rebranded, but it looks very, very similar. Now, one thing that is missing is this here. That is the independently powered buzzer. That thing is super crucial on a MicroLongRange, and I know I'm repeating myself, but good luck finding one of these if it's 3 kilometers away, lost in tall grass and the battery disconnected. Your quad is basically gone. So these independent buzzers are super important. They're not that expensive, and they should not be missing on any of these quads. So if you buy this, I really recommend get an independent buzzer. There is a ton of space here behind the camera. Put it here and have a bit more peace of mind. Then let's check out the motors, the last part of the electronics. Now these, to my surprise, I have to say, did look better than I expected. So these are 1404 2750 kV. So they copied the exact spec of my Dave C motors. And I think they even tried to copy the look slightly. You know, they both have this shiny coating. So polished and anodized. I don't know if these are actually anodized or if this is, this might also be paint. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. They look quite cool. They seem to be a very decent construction quality. Now let's zoom in on one of them. So as you can see, some proper single-stranded wire, and they have, it looks to me like these magnets are actually curved. So it's not the cheap straight magnets. They have a little lip here securing them. So these motors do look absolutely decent, I would say. Now, I don't know if that's sort of the good 75 aluminum or the cheaper aluminum and so on, but honestly, on a MicroLongRange quad, that is not the most important thing because, I mean, it's not made for crashing, so it's actually not super important what material your motors are, because durability of these motors in crashing is sort of an afterthought. Alright, so that's the electronics so far. To me, it does look quite decent, apart from, obviously, the missing buzzer. Now, to actually jump to conclusions right in the beginning, I would say the weak point of this quad really isn't the electronics. These are actually quite decent. It's not actually not a bad option if you just want to salvage the electronics and put them in another frame. I think the weak point seems to be, in my opinion, the frame. It's not a, how can I put it? It's not a very refined design. It's a single bottom plate. So if you look at how this is cut, I mean, as far as you can infer, the fiber direction from the cosmetic layer here, it does seem to be cut willy-nilly. not across along these fibers, so the arms are a bit soft. They're quite easy to bend. I'll have to find out if you have props in view, but you might have, because it's sort of a wide X. And I mean, the main criticism I would have with this single bottom plate is it's not a split deck construction, which means the quad actually is quite tall. So these are, I think, at least 25mm standoff. So if you put this right next to the Explorer, which has a split deck construction, so you have more space in the front for the camera. Then the bottom plate is split here and continues in the rear, where it's a bit more compact, where you need less space for the stack. And for the unit, well, this is just, you know, one height, and as you can see, I mean, you can basically have a huge gap here. There's sort of a lot of unnecessary space. The whole thing just looks more bulky. I don't know, looks aren't the most important thing on a quad, but I think they are still sort of important, because they're spending a lot of money on a product. I mean, it might as well look good. So I think it just looks bigger and bulkier than the Explorer. And one other criticism about the frame is they got a bit carried away with design elements, I think. Now, yes, that's a face, you know. That these might be, I mean, this might be sort of a skeleton they put on there with ribs and stuff. Honestly, that seems a bit childish. A sort of Halloween theme, and the flames here on the motor mounts. So I don't know, this frame just doesn't fully appeal to me. So I would say that is the main weak point. Also, it seems to be quite heavy. I guess this frame isn't very light, because that's a 3mm bottom plate, which will add a few extra grams. So we have 147 grams here. Wait, that is not a lot, because the Explorer is 164. Oh wait, now obviously I did weight one with the props, the other one without. Alright, now to make this comparison fair, let's take the Shadow Fiend, a second battery strap like on the Explorer, a set of props, and now I think we are missing the prop screws too. It doesn't have a receiver. This one does have a Crossfire Nano and the Immortal T, plus this one is missing a buzzer, but honestly the weight difference isn't I mean, it isn't huge. This one is 10 grams lighter now. If I would add a receiver and maybe a buzzer, I guess it would be slightly heavier, but I have to take this back. They are pretty much the same weight. Alright, so let's quickly conclude on this comparison of equipment and specs. And I would say, well, the Shadow Fiend is quite decently equipped. I mean, especially the motors. I like these motors. I like how they look. They seem to be of decent quality. Stack looks a little bit cheap, but it's, you know, I assume as long as it's reliable, it's absolutely fine. They did cut a corner by removing the buzzer, but also that's not really a deal breaker. You can add one. And I mean, overall, quite a nice package. I think they did cut the most corners on the frame. That's what I don't really like. It looks bulky. It's a bit high. It's bigger. It doesn't look as refined. The design is a bit silly. So I think the overall look and aesthetics of this frame are what would put me off from this quad here, and what's maybe putting off most people. Because actually I talked to someone from Bangladesh, and this one doesn't sell as well as the other MicroLongRange products. And I have an idea, an intuition why this could be, because honestly, if you're going for an Eachine product, usually you're going for an Eachine product because it's much cheaper than its competitors. But honestly, this one isn't. The recommended retail price for this one is $300, and for the Explorer, so both for the Vista version, is $320. And this one's missing the buzzer, so add the buzzer, and bottom line, it's basically the same. So, of course, I know this one is usually discounted quite a lot, so the difference is actually, in reality, a bit higher. This one is usually more available and in stock, while the Explorer is usually sold out. But apart from that, I mean, on paper, the price difference isn't huge, and even with discounts, it's not that huge. So I think that is why most people are going to say, well, if I'm already spending you know, more or less $300 on a quad, well, I might, you know, spend a few dozen more, and get the nice original version that looks nice and I think is, you know, more pleasant looking. I think that's a reason why this hasn't been such a great success. Now, I assume they will just discount it more, apply more discounts, and then it might get interesting for people, especially if you might be looking to just salvage the electronics and motors and put them in another frame. That might also be quite interesting. All right, so I think that was all we could review on the bench. Let's take this thing out and let's actually fly it. Alright, so two things I immediately noticed when flying the Shadow Fiend was there's a bit of props in view, but you know, actually not too bad. I mean, you can see it here on the DJI goggle DVR, and the voltage sensor was not working, which is indeed a rather big problem because you really need a voltage sensor. So no voltage sensor when I flew this the first time. But apart from that, I have to say this thing, I mean, the tune is great. It's got this, you know, perfect micro-long-range flight feeling of being not super locked in, but, you know, rather smooth and relaxed and really very, very relaxing and smooth flight experience. It's a bit hard to describe how these really feel, but they just make you sort of want to relax and cruise and enjoy the landscape. There's really something special to this configuration of props, motors, and an overall quad. So they nailed this. It's perfect. Now, I'm not quite sure if I can fully credit them with that, because probably they just copied the tune as well. But it's something I'm gonna check and actually compare the tune of the Shadow Fiend and the Explorer in a second. It can freestyle a bit, as you see here. But again, just like on the Explorer, you can see it's got some freestyle capabilities, but it doesn't really want to. It feels, you know, it's just not made for that, but you can do it if you want. But overall, this thing just, you know, really invites you to cruise, and Eachine basically got this absolutely right. It just really flies like a micro-long-range class quad should. So really nothing to complain about here, in my opinion. Okay, so back inside, I checked the tune of the Shadow Fiend and compared this to the Flywheel Explorer, and I have to say it's not the same tune. So they didn't copy the Explorer's tune. It seems like Eachine came up with this by themselves. So I have to credit this to them. They have a pretty good tune. But I have a few other complaints about this quad after actually flying it. So number one, the voltage sensor is set up correctly. It seems to be broken, which means the entire flight controller is basically useless and needs to be replaced. There's no way to use a micro-long-range quad, or any quad for that matter, without the voltage sensor. So basically, it's a defective product. In conclusion, without the voltage sensor, this thing is rendered basically unusable, and you have to change the flight controller before you can really make use of this quad, which is absolutely not acceptable. Another issue is on the Vista here. They did cut a little corner. Now, this will not be easy to get on camera. Let me zoom in. As you can see, my UFL disconnected. Now, it did disconnect in a small crash, which usually shouldn't happen, because normally you have, let me just show this on this Explorer here. Normally on these Caddx Vista units, you do have what you see here. I just quickly grab something to point at it. So normally you have this little sheet metal here that is secured by this M2 screw, and it is securing in turn this UFL connector. Now, Eachine didn't put it there. It's missing on my Vista. It's not that it fell off or something. This thing can't fall off. It really isn't there. I assume they did this to save some time during the assembly process of this quad. So this is a problem because my Vista in a pretty small crash immediately disconnected, and I think the Vista is protected against running without an antenna and breaking its transmitting module, which can happen if you run anything that transmits without an antenna. But then again, that's a bit of a problem. Neither did they mount this piece of sheet metal or even include it in the package so you can mount it yourself afterwards. So that's a bit of a problem, I think. Another problem is this thing is set up to run the DJI controller, which I guess most people will not do. So you have to disconnect the S-Bus connection from the Vista. And here I found another problem. There's no free hardware UART left on the flight controller. It does in principle have 5 or 6 UARTs, so it's enough. But they aren't broken out. There's no pads. So all you can do if you want to run Crossfire is run your Crossfire, set your Crossfire receiver to S-Bus and run it through the RC pad on the flight controller. So it's a bit of a bummer because this introduces some additional latency in compared to the Crossfire protocol, quite significant latency. So I ended up, just slamming an FrSky XM receiver in here for the purposes of testing. Wasn't doing any long range, but that's something that is a bit annoying. If you're going to run it on Crossfire, you will not be able to actually use this with the Crossfire protocol. Okay, so I think these are pretty severe criticisms that I found. Flight controller is basically broken, and the Vista is more or less waiting to fail on you because the UFL will disconnect in a crash. Because I mean, the antenna here is pretty big. You're going to crash on this antenna, and as soon as this antenna pushes, and mine is actually disconnected, this antenna will quickly make the UFL pop off or even break off. Alright, so overall, should you buy this or not? And I have to say the answer is a clear no, in my opinion. There's a few deal breakers here for me. I mean, yes, the frame design isn't the best in my opinion, but it's honestly, in terms of function, it's not a problem at all. This thing does work absolutely perfectly. The motors are great, the tune is great, it flies great, but it does have these issues that I found with the UFL on the Vista, where it might break off or at least pop off, which would be very frustrating. The flight controller didn't work properly. It's basically useless without the voltage sensor. So these are things where I have to say, no, it's not a recommendation here. Now, does this mean that all the other products are perfect and there never has been any problem on the Explorer and everybody that got one had perfectly working flight controllers and everything? Also, no. I saw a few comments, a few people that were, a bit frustrated with quality issues on their Explorer and other products, but I honestly have to say, I don't have any more insight in any numbers or percentage of people that issues. I don't know if it's normal or above average, because obviously hundreds of these have been sold. It has been incredibly popular, so you're gonna see certain percentage of people complaining, because usually those people which don't have any issues are not posting in Facebook groups and complaining. So I don't really know. All I can really judge is the review models I get and that I actually test. So that's all I can talk about. And really on the Explorers I tested, I never had any issue personally, while on this one immediately, basically broken flight controllers. So that's all I can tell. I can really just judge just based on what I tried here, and all I can try is, a few of these. I cannot go and test 50 different Explorers to see if maybe 1 out of 50 has an issue, or if, test 50 Shadow Fiends and find out if maybe 1 or 2 out of these 50 have an issue with the flight controller. That's not possible. So all I can judge is what I have here. And from this, I have to conclude that there is a problem with the flight controller and a few things like the Vista, which I don't know if they just forgot it on this one or if it's on all of them. I can only conclude that I can't really recommend this one. Alright guys, then I hope you found this interesting and useful. Let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because maybe you're wondering why I'm reviewing the Shadow Fiend and not the Hex like everybody else. Well, mine is still stuck in the post, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my review of the Hex Explorer. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Bye bye.